Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Shaima here. Today I'm doing cerebrospinal fluid and the blood-brain barrier. These two topics are very often asked 5 markers for you all in the university exam. So first I think today we'll do first CSF and then I'll move on to the blood-brain barrier. So yeah, here you have the slide here, the cerebrospinal fluid. Now what do you actually mean by the cerebrospinal fluid? Now, the cerebrospinal fluid is actually a fluid which is present in the ventricular system of the brain, the subarachnoid space of the brain, and the spinal cord, and the central spinal canal. Now, the brain and the spinal cord, are surrounded by three membranes. You have the dura mater, the arachnoid matter, and the pia mater. You can see in the picture. Can you see here down? You can see the three membranous covering of the brain and the spinal cord. First one being the dura mater here down, and then you can see the arachnoid matter here on the left side, and then you have the pia mater. So now you need to have a little understanding about what the dura mater is, what the arachnoid matter is, and what the pia mater is. Basically, dura mater is the outermost membrane and is made up of a tough fibrous tissue, and the dura mater extends up to S2, where the spinal cord ends at the lower border of L1. Now, the second one, let's see what the arachnoid matter is, which is the second membrane which covers the brain and the spinal cord. Now, arachnoid matter is the middle membrane. Here there's a small potential space between the dura mater and the arachnoid matter, which we call as a subdural space, which is filled with a thin layer of fluid. Now let's see what the pia mater is. Now the innermost membrane is the pia mater, which is basically in close approximation with the brain and the spinal cord. The space between the arachnoid and the pia mater, we call it as a subarachnoid space. The subarachnoid space of the brain and the spinal cord and the ventricles are filled with this cerebrospinal fluid. Now at some places you can see that the subarachnoid space shows dilatations which you call as the cisternae, and there are three cisternae which are present. I don't think the cisternae are marked in this picture. So the three of them to name, they are the cisterna pontis, the cisterna magna, and the cisterna basalis. Now it's basically the cisterna basalis which contains the circle of villi. So that's generally about the cerebrospinal fluid, where exactly it is present, and I wanted you all to know a little about the covering of the membrane, the brain and the spinal cord, where I had actually mentioned about the three membranes, the dura mater, arachnoid matter, and the pia mater. And the pia mater being the most important here for us in point of view of the cerebrospinal fluid, because it's the space between the arachnoid matter and the pia mater, which is called as the subarachnoid space. And the subarachnoid space of the brain and the spinal cord and the ventricles are actually filled with this fluid which we call as the cerebrospinal fluid. Let's go to the next slide. Now a little more about the meninges, which I've already told you all, which I've just put in the most briefest form. Three connective tissues, as I told you, the dura mater, arachnoid matter, and the pia mater. And you exactly know how they are present, where they are present, what is the space in between them. Now to brief up about the function of the meninges, what does all three do? The dura mater, the arachnoid matter, and the pia mater, if you look at, they cover and protect the central nervous system. They protect blood vessels and enclose the venous sinuses. It contains the cerebrospinal fluid, that's our matter of concern here. They form partitions within the skull. So you can see that here, the outermost layer, which is the dura mater, then you have the arachnoid matter, and then you have the pia mater. Now let's go to the cerebrospinal fluid. The cerebrospinal fluid, I've already mentioned to you all. It's only that I've just put it up in points here. It's present in the subarachnoid space over the brain and the spinal cord, and in the ventricles of the brain, and also in the central canal of the spinal cord. Now let's see where the site, where is it formed? What is the site of formation of the cerebrospinal fluid. So if you look at the site and then we'll go to the mechanism of formation. The site of the formation is CSF basically produced, the major amount is produced by the choroid plexus of the lateral, the third and the fourth ventricles, but mainly from the lateral ventricles. Now about 50% of the CSF is produced by this mechanism. Please keep that in mind. 50% of the cerebrospinal fluid is produced by the choroid plexus of what? Of the lateral and the third and the fourth ventricles. And please remember that it's mainly from the lateral ventricles that the CSF is produced, and 50% of the CSF is being produced by this mechanism. Now, you can see that some amount of CSF is also secreted directly from the ependymal layers that lines the ventricles and the meningeal blood vessels. Now, this accounts for around 40% of the CSF that is produced by this mechanism, and now there is a small 10% of the CSF which is produced by the blood vessels of the brain and the spinal cord. I think I haven't mentioned that in the PPT here. Now let's go to the mechanism of formation. Now if you look at the mechanism of formation, it has been proved experimentally that it's formed partly by an active mechanism and partly by ultrafiltration. Now the substances can enter the cerebrospinal fluid it can be through active transport, which is the most important mode. Some amount of transport substances enter and leave the CSF by facilitated diffusion also, and also by the co-transport. Now the rate of formation, it is around 0.2 to 0.3 ml per minute. Amount of CSF present is 150 ml. pH of CSF is 7.3 and the pressure is around 100 to 200 millimeters of water. You don't tell it is mercury here it is water. Now you can see the choroid plexus where the major amount of, especially the lateral ventricle, where 50% of the, it's basically in the choroid plexus, 50% of the cerebrospinal fluid is formed. 40% is directly from the ependymal layer that lines the ventricles and the meningeal blood vessels, and 10% is produced by the blood vessels of the brain and the spinal cord. Now, how do you, what is the evidence, experimental evidence do you have, which proves that, or which confirms the site of formation of the cerebral fluid? So first one is, during any brain surgery in patients or even in animal experiments, fluid is seen coming from the choroid plexus. So which, indicates that that is the site of formation one. Now if, the aqueduct of Sylvius is occluded, immediately you can see the lateral ventricles becoming distended. Now next comes to the foramen of Monro. When that is occluded, again there is a distension of the ventricle. If the choroid plexus is removed, the ventricle remains collapsed. So these are basically the evidences which tells us that choroid plexus is the major site of formation of, or 50% formation of the CSF happens in the choroid plexus. Now let's see the mechanism of absorption. Till now I was talking about the active transport, facilitated diffusion and the co-transport came into picture when the mechanism of formation of CSF was mentioned. Now let's see what is a mechanism of absorption. So mechanism of absorption, if you look at, it's by a passive mechanism, the absorption, but it's controlled by two forces. You have the hydrostatic pressure, which is the most important one, and then we have the colloidal osmotic pressure. Now hydrostatic pressure, you need to know a little more detail on that. The hydrostatic pressure of the cerebrospinal fluid, it ranges from 100 to 200 millimeters of water. Now, what is the contradicting factor here is the pressure in the dural sinuses is negative. So it's actually this pressure gradient which causes the filtration of the cerebrospinal fluid into the dural sinuses. Is that clear? So what it means to tell is the hydrostatic pressure of the CSF is basically ranging from 100 to 200 millimeters of water, but the pressure in the dural sinuses is negative pressure. So because of this huge pressure gradient which causes filtration of the CSF into the dural sinuses. Now second, we need to know about the colloidal osmotic pressure. Now the colloidal osmotic pressure of the venous blood is about 25 millimeters of mercury, and if you look at the colloidal osmotic pressure in the CSF, it is almost nil. So basically this pressure difference also facilitates the absorption of the CNS into the venous blood. And I think there's one more point which you can mention, which also actually contributes to the mechanism of absorption. CSF is also drained by bulk flow by forming vacuoles through the endothelial cells. So that is also, one way how the CSF is, which is the mechanism of absorption of the cerebrospinal fluid. Now let's look at the circulation. So you now know the site of formation of cerebrospinal fluid, site of absorption. Site of absorption, I think I haven't mentioned. Okay, site of absorption, to make a mention, the CSF is basically absorbed via the arachnoid villi into the dural sinuses and also the spinal veins. Now, a small amount of the CSF may pass through the sheets of cranial nerves and then enter into the cervical lymphatics. Now, if you look at it's something like, roughly 4 by 5th is drained into the dural sinuses and 1 by 5th into the spinal veins. That is basically about, the site of absorption. And you already know what arachnoid villi are. The arachnoid villi are basically small finger-like processes which projects into the venous sinuses. So now let's see the circulation of cerebrospinal fluid. The CSF is formed in the lateral ventricles and it flows into the third ventricle through the foramen of Monro. That you can see it in the flow chart here. Now from the third ventricle, it flows into the fourth ventricle through aqueduct of Sylvius. The CSF from here, it then flows into the subarachnoid space through the foramen of Magentia and the foramen of Luschka. Now nearly 80% of the CSF from the subarachnoid space will enter the dural sinuses through the arachnoid villi. Please remember that point. Now that was 80%, isn't it? Now we have a remaining of 20% there, and this 20% will enter the spinal veins along the sheets of cranial nerves into the cervical lymphatics and also into the perivascular spaces by the process of diffusion. So what you need to keep in mind is there is always a continuous flow of CSF from the fourth ventricle into the central canal of the spinal cord. So that's about how it is circulated. Even if you draw this picture in your answer script, you need to explain it the way I have told you all, because when you put a foramen Monro in between the lateral ventricles and the third ventricle, you need to explain, how the foramen of Monro is connected to the lateral ventricles and the third ventricle. So what I mean to tell is how the first, I'll just, explain the first part alone so that you follow the same way. So basically how we do is once you draw the flow chart, you need to tell that the CSF which is formed in the lateral ventricles, it flows into the third ventricle through the foramen of Monro. So the similar way, you just come down where you end on how 80% of the CSF from the subarachnoid space, how it enters the dural sinuses, and the 20% it enters the spinal veins. So that's about the circulation of CSF. The same thing has been depicted in a picture. Now let's see the comparison and composition of the CSF and the plasma. So what happens here is, see, the different ions are mentioned here. Now if you look at sodium, Na plus, CSF has around 150 milliequivalents per liter. Plasma also very close to it. The potassium concentration you can see is more in plasma. It's almost a half of what is there in plasma in the CSF. Calcium concentration, it is 2 in CSF and 3 in plasma. The chloride ion concentration is much more in CSF compared to the 115 in the plasma. The bicarbonate ions concentration is 22 in CSF and a little more, that is 28 in plasma. The protein composition, you can see a huge difference between the CSF and the plasma. CSF has got more of protein content and plasma has only 6 gram per dl. Then glucose, if you look at, it's almost the same. CSF, the glucose presence is around 50 to 80 milligram per dl, and plasma it is 70 to 110 milligram per dl. So now let's see the functions of CSF. See, all these small topics like function, cytoformation, circulation, all these can come as 3 markers also for you all. So now when you look at the functions of CSF, I have summarized the points into some 8 to 9 points. So if you look at the first function, it basically acts as a lymph, as there is no lymphatic system in the brain. That needs to be the first point which you are going to put down. The second is it provides a proper chemical environment for the optimal activity of the neurons, the second most important one. The cerebral neurons functions the best, when the CSF provides this perfect chemical environment for its functioning. Third one, it's useful for the diagnosis of brain disorder as it reflects the brain function. Fourth one, it protects the brain from injuries because it acts as a shock absorber, or it's a fluid buffer for the brain. The fifth one, it takes part in maintaining a constant internal volume of the cranium, which you call it as the Monro-Kelly doctrine. That's very important. So the constant internal volume of the cranium is maintained by the CSF, and the whole process we call as the Monro-Kelly doctrine. Number 6, continuous formation and drainage basically helps in preventing the accumulation of metabolic products within the brain. Seventh one, it provides nutrition to the nerve cell. And the last one, where it means that, the control of respiration, when you talk about the carbon dioxide, which acts on the medullary chemoreceptors by altering the pH of the cerebrospinal fluid and also the brain extracellular fluid. Now, any change in the CSF pH is also very important in acclimatization at very high altitude by combating respiratory alkalosis. The next last point, the CSF basically reduces the weight of brain from 1400 grams to 50 grams. Why is it so? Because basically brain floats in the cerebrospinal fluid. That's also a very interesting point to be remembered. So I think that's about the functions of cerebrospinal fluid. Now at the end, now we come to the applied aspects. Now when it comes to the applied aspects of cerebrospinal fluid, now what do you mean by that? Whenever there is an accumulation of CSF, so I think first one is hydrocephalus, where I've mentioned the point is pathological accumulation of CSF in the cranium. So basically when there is an accumulation of CSF in the cranium, this may result in decreased absorption, and it can be increased absorption also, as it happens in the inflammation of brain. So you can see the picture of hydrocephalus. So hydrocephalus, if you look at, there are two types. You have the internal hydrocephalus and the external. Just one second. Yeah. So internal hydrocephalus, how do you define? Internal hydrocephalus is basically due to the accumulation of the CSF in the ventricular system only. Now the block is intraventricular, either at the foramen of Monro or the cerebral aqueduct, or it can be even at the fourth ventricle foramina. So that is what results in the internal hydrocephalus. Now what do you mean by external hydrocephalus? Now here the CSF accumulates in the subarachnoid space. It can be due to a block outside the ventricular system, which is caused by the inflammation of the meninges, or thrombosis in the dural sinuses, or a block in the arachnoid villi. Now, now hydrocephalus is basically associated with an increased intracranial pressure. The subject suffers from very severe headache and vomiting. Now in very severe conditions, it may lead to atrophy of the brain, mental weakness, and also convulsions. Now the applied aspect continues. The first most important one was hydrocephalus, where we discussed about internal hydrocephalus and the external hydrocephalus. You need to exactly know what the differences are. Now let's see, its relation to the intracranial pressure. Now, an intracranial pressure normally is increased in hydrocephalus. The intracranial pressure is increased in cerebral tumors and other space occupying lesions. ICP increased in brain injuries, and it's also increased in some types of brain hemorrhages. Now the third is, we are finished with hydrocephalus, then intracranial pressure. Now the very important clinical aspect is where we need to talk about the lumbar puncture. Now what do you mean by lumbar puncture? You also call it as a spinal tap. So in lumbar puncture or a spinal tap, a needle is basically introduced through the intervertebral disc between L3 and L4 into the subarachnoid space, and CSF can be thus collected. Now why do we do this? Why do you have to ever do a lumbar puncture or a spinal tap? Now this is basically done for diagnostic purposes, like for example, it can be viral tuberculosis, pyogenic meningitis. Now by analyzing the sample of CSF, the concentrations of proteins, glucose, the presence of blood, everything can be noted. Now the second, by measuring the intracranial pressure can be measured. Now introducing radiopaque substances for myelography, that is basically done to visualize the subarachnoid space in the spinal cord and taking X-ray pictures. Radioactive substances can also be used. Now another reason why lumbar puncture is done is to relieve pressure. What pressure? For relieving the intracranial pressure temporarily. Now small amounts of CSF must be removed very slowly to relieve the intracranial pressure when raised, and clinically by injecting. Now what do you inject clinically? Hypertonic saline, hypertonic glucose, hyperosmolar mannitol to decrease the intracranial pressure. So now the third reason why lumbar puncture or a spinal tap is done is to introduce drugs. Different drugs like some antibiotics, some anti-tumor agents and all, they do lumbar puncture. Even to introduce an anesthetic solution in anorectal surgeries to relieve pain in labor, also a lumbar puncture is done. You can see the picture. So I think the blood-brain barrier, I think I would do it in tomorrow's class. So now you can be, finish studying CSF and be thorough with that. So I think that's it about the cerebrospinal fluid. It's a very often asked 5 marker, and as I went through the class, you would have already realized that there are so many 3 markers which are hidden in this chapter. So that's all for today's class. So please make your mind maps and do a thorough learning of the topic. So tomorrow I'll be continuing with the blood-brain barrier.